What's up, my good peoples? Welcome to the Be Transformed podcast, where we're talking about ideas that stimulate wholesome thinking into identity, purpose, vision, and action. I am James Anderson, and with me are some of my two favorite peoples. We got Carolyn Anderson and Logan Eaton. My good peoples, what's cracking?
Hello, BT World. It's been a little while since I've been on.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is great.
I was thinking the last time I was on, I had a little baby monitor next to me because we would put the kids to bed, and I had to make sure I didn't hear the baby crying. That baby is now 5, almost 6, so it's been a hot minute.
A little while.
Wow, yeah.
That's funny.
Huh.
I forgot about that. Yeah, so yeah, I thought for today's topic we had to get the whole band back together because this one, I tell you, the last podcast we did, we talked about getting recentered. What are our non-negotiables, and like what are the things that keep cultivating your gift? For me, I was just hearing God's call. He's like, hey, get back to the podcast as one of those things. And what we're about to talk about today, like I had no idea this was like hiding, just waiting for us to stumble upon it. And so this whole thing is just, it's a wonderful surprise. Very surprised, and it's very wonderful. So yeah. So today we're going to talk about culture. And when we're talking about culture, I want to, culture, we're talking about, you got culture in a business. You got culture, really, and the most important one is like your life, your family. And then, we also got like, BT, like what is the BT culture? Last year I was really asking this question. I was like, what would it look like to really establish, Be Transformed as an organization? And one of those things I was thinking about was, I was thinking about like our mentality. I said, what is it actually that makes up the BT mentality? Like what causes us to think the thoughts that we think and do the things that we do? Like, why do we care so much about purpose? Why do we care so much about action? Why, what is that, those driving ideas that, cause us to do everything we're doing, right? Like Logan, you're talking about getting out there today and driving in some fields. It's like, what's the stuff that's driving all these things? And I feel like oftentimes I come up with a goose egg. I'll come up with a couple ideas, but it's like it's I'm always like working for it, and I don't, but it's like these last couple of years we've been working with another organization, and I really feel like it's helped be like a school ground to really learn about culture. And as I've tried to influence and shape culture, I feel like as I sit here right now, I've never understood it more. Not that I totally understand it, but like this is the most I've ever understood about culture right here, right now. And just this past week, cultivating this topic has, it's just like enlightening to the nines. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think every new culture you get around gives you a new experience.
Sure.
So kind of the more you are around different cultures, the more you expand your knowledge.
Totally. Yeah. So if we looked at like the definition of culture that we're going to work with, culture is the beliefs, mentality, priorities, activities, habits, and traditions of a group of people. So culture is the culmination of the ingredients that determine what is normal and acceptable in a group of people. And culture really sets the trajectory for your life. And therefore, the ideas that make up your culture are vitally necessary. So culture, right, is the beliefs, and your belief sets your mentality. So how you actually think and your perspective. Well, that mentality then affects your priorities. So what is it that you deem most important? Well, then those priorities affect your activities. And those activities, repeated consistently, create your habits. And your habits then really solidify your actions. And then it's also the traditions, right? And your traditions really kind of, it makes a full circle because your traditions really go back to reinforcing your beliefs. Especially when you think about, like, you know, you go into an organization or you get a new job, and, you know, it's interesting because you go into a space that you didn't create. So it's like a culture you didn't create, a team you didn't pick, like, and you go in there and, you know, there's, you got to enter into a different culture. And then if you're trying to influence it, you know, there's just a whole process of really kind of getting in there and building trust and developing influence. And yeah. So culture, right? Cause it's, I don't know. It's the things that shape what you do. It's funny because, you know, you're born into culture. When you're born, right, you're born into a family, and that family's already got culture, right? You got two parents who have already, you know, kind of established a life and have certain weekly activities that they get into. You know, they have certain mentalities. And so you're born into the culture, you know, and so, you know, your parents, that would have been the exact same thing for them at some point before they were married. You know, they were babies, grew up in two different families, two different cultures, and then they came together. And so now you have this mash of whatever that was, which is affected by their parents and their parents' parents. And yeah, and, you know, when you think about like a baby's development, like mental development, when you're first born, you know, everything in your environment, you're just absorbing, right? There's no experience to be able to judge whether what you're seeing is right or wrong. You're just seeing it for the first time, and that's just becoming your reality, and it's becoming your culture. So you're talking about like your emotional energy, you know, whether you're being loved or not, or the conversations going on. I mean, all that stuff, all those inputs are just going into, you know, the baby's mind, because, you know, we're very different from animals. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but I mean, some people are hairier than others, I suppose. But it's like, you know, you think about it like a bird. A bird doesn't have to go to school to learn how to build a nest or find a worm, and that's just that innate instinct where it's like there's already the download of how to live, how to respond in this situation, right? You got your fight or flight, you know, kind of mentality. That stuff's just born in, right? They're not having to learn how to do anything. There's just a red light that goes off, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, danger! Let's fly." But like with people, that's not the same thing. You know, you come. I mean, there's some like genetic stuff that I don't understand, but then it's like it's that, and it's in your environment where you are meant to absorb what real life is. You're meant to absorb and understand like what your identity is from those parents, your conduct of life and behavior. You're meant, like the family unit, right? A husband and a wife who love each other and are committed. That is meant to be a real environment where then the kids grow up learning the truth. And so, yeah, so good or bad, you know, babies are growing up in these environments and just absorbing everything. Well, all right, well then once you get a little bit older, you know, there's more things that start to shape, you know, your idea of life and what goes on, you know, and, you know, for us growing up, I mean, we went to church. Our parents took us to church every Sunday. You know, we went to school. Maybe, you know, you go on certain vacations, or then you hang out with certain family, and then you start developing like a friend group. all these inputs, all of these are inputs that go into then shaping up who you are and what your culture is. And, you know, you got media, the stuff you watch. Where I'm at we're at my parents' house, and a bunch of my family's together because my sister's daughter was graduating from high school, so they had a little party, and it was just funny. We're talking about this and just talk about media. You know, my family, we watched Goonies. Carolyn, did you ever watch Goonies growing up?
That was not a movie that we watched.
You know, so there's just like stuff that, like, you know, when we were younger, we'd be quoting or whatever, and Carolyn never even saw it. And you know, it's just funny. It's just like your different cultures, you know, how different people grew up and the different influences everybody had. But yeah, you know, so those are all different inputs that kind of add to what your culture is, what your belief systems are, what your traditions are. You know, like with church, you know, you'd have Easter, you'd have Christmas. What else you have? I don't know, school, and you'd have Thanksgiving, Halloween. No, it's not one. No, I was kidding.
I remember how impressionable like I was growing up. Like I was just thinking as you were talking how like when you're growing up, how impressionable you are to whatever culture's around you. Like when you're really young, like I wanted to be like my dad. So I listened to the music he listened to. Sure. I wore the similar clothes that he wore. You know, he was always wearing these like bodybuilding, you know, muscle shirts. So I was always wearing those.
The ones, the nip shirts?
Yeah, like so.
That's where that came from.
So when I was younger, though, like you're just so impressionable growing up. And then like in middle school and high school, like I remember do you remember like the Adidas shoes with the 3 black stripes on it? That was the big thing. And it was like, that was the culture of our school and probably, you know, every school. But it was like, if you didn't have those, you weren't part of the culture of that. Like you were an outcast. And so it's like you wanted to have those shoes because that was the culture, and you wanted to be a part of that culture. So it's just, I don't know, it's just making me think how like impressionable we are in that stage of life to culture. Because that can, like, you know, you can, it doesn't dictate your future, but it dictates a lot of like steps that you take at that age.
Well, because
it's just funny.
You haven't determined what's important and why you do the things you do. So you follow what's around you versus like, no, I don't care what other people are doing because I'm going to do what I think is important or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Shoes are a simple example, but it determines your behavior and the choices that you make and the activities you get in, good or bad.
Right.
Because you have to know who you are and why you do what you do in order to make the right choices.
Right. Yeah. It's like if you had the shoes, okay, you needed to be in this sport. You needed to do this. You needed to have these jeans.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it was just like, yeah, it's just making me think just how impressionable like culture is to, you know, kids and growing up into the middle school and high school age. So sure. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. That's funny. You know, in junior high, we had uniforms. So it's funny, you know, you're talking about, we had these jeans, you got to have these jeans. It's like we had uniforms. I think I don't know why people have uniforms, but I think I don't know if it has to do with that or
there's some reason like that. I had a dress code at one point.
Yeah.
So you had some freedom of color choice.
Oh wow.
But
yeah, we were khaki, white, and navy blue, I think.
Nice. Yeah, it keeps you from having to spend hundreds of dollars on clothing.
On the next batch.
Eliminate individuality.
Oh, yeah. We're all the same.
Yeah. Still culture, though. Like, it still creates culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's the attitudes, you know, that shape it. That just still shape you inside of whatever. Absolutely. Yep. Totally. Right. So then you think about, okay, so, you know, you grow up through school but then it's like, all right, when you actually, you know, get done with that and you move out, this a whole nother like kind of realm of culture, because, once you move out from your parents' house, you kind of get a little more freedom to kind of think your own thoughts, make your own decisions. And right, you can start questioning everything you've ever been taught, and really start to kind of pick what it is that you believe, what do you think is important, and what do you think your life should be about. And and you got to make decisions, and you get a job, and you got to manage money, and you can do whatever you want, but it's like you also learn that there's consequences to doing whatever you want.
Yeah.
But then, it's just kind of funny because it's kind of like, so you grow up and then you want to get out. And then once you get out, it's just, I feel like, you kind of build off of everything you grew up with, but then you get married, and I call this the clash of two cultures, because this is hilarious. And Carolyn and I were reminiscing over these things, and I was like, oh my gosh, you got to be on here because it's hilarious. So it's like, I think about, you get married, and again, okay, so here's two different people from two different cultures, right? I mean, obviously, you most likely got a lot of similarities, unless you're marrying somebody from another country, and then you got real big culture clashes.
Basic beliefs align.
But
basic things, but
basic. Yeah, well, I mean, I think, first you get married and you kind of go through like the honeymoon phase. And, I was talking to these older guys when I was newly married, and they'd be like, how's it going? I was like, man, it's going awesome. They're like, oh, you're in the honeymoon phase. And I'm like, whatever, man, I'll be a honeymoon for the rest of my life. And it turns out honeymoon was a phase. I think that's like it's like the free gas to like just get you going and rolling, and then you have to start working for it. But yeah, honeymoon phase is just like, it's just lovely to be together. You're just enjoying each other, and there's just tons of grace for everything, for all your differences, right? Two different cultures, two different people coming from two different spaces who are now never leaving the same house. It's one thing, when you got a little break, but it's like, okay, the break doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, and then that's when your clash of cultures comes in, and it's funny because it's over the smallest things, but it's all this. But it's like it starts to come. It's coming from how you grow up and your family culture, right? So case in point, spaghetti. All right. So spaghetti for Carolyn was like, you make a pot of noodles, and then you take the ground beef and you turn it into meatballs, and that's a whole process. And then you have another pot with sauce on it. And so this might have been like the first time we had spaghetti together, and I'm like, how come the sauce isn't in the noodles? Like,
because I was doing it the right way. Now let me clarify
Yeah, where's your culture coming from?
I've got an Italian family, so you talk about family meals, and it's a big Italian meal, and you don't put the sauce on the noodles. You can pick your amount of sauce you want. You apply it yourself.
Self-applied.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I've never
otherwise you
heard
can't. Otherwise you can't control how much sauce you have. So
all the sauce.
And I'll tell you, before I even liked sauce, I didn't take the sauce. I just ate the noodles with butter and Parmesan.
See, that wasn't even an option growing up.
I was picky.
See, this way was better. We were not picky.
There was no choice in your option.
So you made the spaghetti noodles, and then you browned up the meat, and once the meat was browned in the pan, then you threw the sauce in there, and then once you drained your noodles, then you threw it all in the same pot, and then you ate it. That was spaghetti.
Is that how you did it, Logan?
When I lived in my apartment, I would just cook the noodles and then just take a bite of noodles right out of the pan and then just drink the sauce.
Out of the jug. That was the hamburger helper days.
No, just kidding. But no, yeah, that's how. I don't think I've ever made spaghetti. But that's.
Did you not
my
grow
mom
up
used to
eating
do it that
spaghetti?
way. Yeah, she would do it where you mix the the sauce and the hamburger, and then you just pour that on the noodles. Is that what your recipe book says?
that's what my recipe book was. Yeah.
All together, no
But
separation.
none of us are Italian. So
I know you guys are all doing it wrong.
We're the Americans. At some point, somebody had
Now
Italian
I will
neighbors.
tell you, there even within the Italian family. Now my aunts, they did things a little differently. So their kids would be like, "Which pot's yours, Mom? I'm not eating the other one," because they wanted their own moms because they all did it a little different.
Right, and then you get used to it.
Yep.
Right, because culture determines what is normal for your group of people.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, so another one was like, this would have been the first year, and it would have been like, it's like some weekend. It would have been like 3:00 in the afternoon, and I went into the kitchen to go to the pantry, and Carolyn gets like pissed. She's like, "Are you really hungry? Do you really need to be eating?" And I'm just like shocked. I'm like, I don't think I've ever been questioned on whether or not I was okay to
I grew up with sisters. I wasn't around a lot of guys. And he just ate more than I did. And I was like, why is our food disappearing so quickly? You really need to eat. Had to protect my leftovers. One time he ate those.
Oh, that was only one time. And I paid for that one. I never did it again.
Those are my leftovers. You know, you don't finish it at the restaurant. You bring it home like, ooh, this will make a good lunch tomorrow. No.
That's free game.
No. It's not free
It didn't have a name on
Once it leaves the restaurant, it's anyone's.
I know. Well, now it's like, I think Jimmy John's is the only place I do it, but I'll get 2 sandwiches.
It was like
So
the
then
one big one. It
So
just, like,
I'll eat half the sandwich, and then, later the next day I'll have a whole nother sandwich.
or second dinner
Nice.
sometimes.
Or second dinner, yeah.
Which now our son
yeah.
has started to. He's like, this is just second breakfast. Our 12, almost 13-year-old starting to do that multiple meal thing. So his sisters will know what it's like to have a guy around.
Yeah.
they won't they won't do what I did.
5 meals a day. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys have any funny ones like that? Or you're still in it? We can't talk about that.
No, yeah, we left that gas station a long time ago.
How many years
that
are
free
you guys
gas
in?
This will be 4.
4, okay.
So yeah, that first couple years was probably that phase more. Yeah, now it's like, yeah, I know that's funny because just yesterday, Michelle was like, I was packing a bunch of stuff to take to work, and she's like, "Is that your 3rd granola bar?" I was like, "Yeah."
Every half hour.
They don't make them that big anymore, so 3 of them is just a snack anymore. Anyway, so yeah, we definitely have had our similar experience. I'm trying to think of one that stood out, but I guess my driving and her driving is one that sticks out. Like when she's driving, it's I'm like holding on for dear life.
Is she driving fast?
Yeah, I think sometimes, but like when I'm driving, I think with her, it's like, I don't know. It's like, how long have you been driving this car?
Look, I can't remember which one's the brake.
But with me, it's like she's car sick immediately.
Oh.
And like as soon as we're in the driveway, she's like, "Yeah, I don't feel good. You're driving like crazy."
You haven't even got out of park yet.
Yeah. So we have our differences there for sure.
That's
But
funny.
no, yeah, those are just a couple I could think of.
Yeah. Yeah, so then, it's like, all right, so those are like just like a couple funny things, but then it's like, everything's different though in the beginning, because it's like, how you spend your time is different, and how you want to spend your time is different, and then who communicates what they want is different.
For sure.
I'm making faces over here because we definitely had that where it was like, the unspoken expectation was like, I was gone all day. Why didn't you empty the dishwasher? It's like, I didn't even think about it.
Because you were gone all day and you didn't do it. Yeah. Yeah, but then,
yeah, for sure.
And then even like how you spend money, right? You know, you link up your bank accounts and stuff, and yeah, how do you spend money and what do you spend money on? And I just remember, you know, I would see people who have been married for like maybe like 3 years or something, and I was like, those guys look like a team. Like I would watch them communicate, and I was like, the one person communicated and the other person understood what they meant. Right. And there wasn't like this conflict. And I was like, because, you know, I think after that first year, whatever, and, you know, you're just dealing with all these small things, right? Like, because essentially you're taking your two cultures and you're working towards mending them to become one. But the thing is, right, it's like the gas isn't free anymore and you actually have to work for it. And so, you know, you just kind of feel like you're always at odds. You're trying to communicate and the other person doesn't understand you, or you get offended and now you're talking out of your offense and whatever, you know, you're working it out. But I just remember seeing people who were a couple years down the road, and I was like, yes, there's hope. there's hope. This could get better. And we could actually be a team and be together. And yeah. So, you know, you're working through that. And then, you know, at some point, then you have kids. All right, this is a whole nother layer of past culture. You know, how did you grow up? Like what things, you know, are the way and what things aren't the way. And for me, I'm definitely more free flowing, and Carolyn was more like, no, this is the way. And but then that, you know, and then, you know, the degree of difficulty and challenge that would be the degree that different people are connected to their families or their past way of doing it. And that's all just very interesting. And so, you know, you work through that because, again, you know, you're seeking to become a culture. You're developing your way of doing things, and in some ways you're getting free of some things, in other ways, you know, you're just trying to figure it out. But yeah, but then you have kids, you know, and your kids start to grow up, and now this is hilarious because, you know, so sometimes people think they believe certain things, or, you know, people would say, okay, these are my values. But your values aren't necessarily like, and your beliefs aren't necessarily what you say they are. It's what it is actually reflected in your life. Like the things you actually do are the things you actually value. How you actually spend your time shows what you actually value. And while having kids is hilarious because again, your kids are just absorbing everything that's going on in your environment. How you're talking, your attitude, your emotional energy, all that stuff is just getting downloaded. So if you really want to know what you think is important and how you communicate, have kids, because then you will hear them saying everything you are saying right back at you. You cannot hide from this because they're just mimicking what they see, right? Because they're learning the behavior that is normal. Right? It's normal to them because it's the only thing they're being exposed to. So it's just really funny to then kind of like, you know, your kids can really help you get better.
It's nothing worse than going, why would you respond that way to your sister? I'm like, ooh, that's probably how that was me. Whoops.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, you know, and then it's like, all right, so like, you know, your kid's development, like we, you know, when our son was born, you know, and he's walking, you know, we were in the backyard one day and we had this, you know, this 2-story play set that had like a ladder that was straight up and down. And then it had this super steep slide. And then it also had like a fireman's pole inside the house on the 2nd story. So there's just like a big hole.
It's kind of an advanced play set. It was there when we bought the house. James wanted to tear it down, but I was like, no, future children, they will like it.
I did have to rebuild it at one point.
But it was definitely built for older kids. Training ground.
Yeah, but like instead of like instead of keeping him away from it and like blocking it off, I taught him how to climb the ladder. I was like, cause like, you know, when you only have one kid, you're pretty aware of what's going on, right? Like you're kind of paying attention to what's happening for the most part. And, but it's like at the end of the day, dude, there's going to be a time where he wanders off and we were doing something else and we didn't know it. So instead of being afraid of the environment, we intentionally taught him how to handle and interact with the environment. So I taught him how to go up the ladder and go down the ladder. You know, like, you know, if you end up out here by yourself and you're doing this, you need to know how to navigate it. You know, but that was just kind of like one of our mentalities of like, oh, you know, we're teaching our kids to be able to live in this environment instead of being afraid of what could happen in this environment, right? Because realistically, you need to know how to live. You don't need to know how to be scared. But the approach that the parents take, though, do dictate the kid's mentality, right? So, like, when kids are younger, maybe this, like, I don't know, from 2 to 4 or 2 or 3 years old, you know, we'd have people over from church and everybody had young kids. And we had, you know, there would be a swing set and you could see, and you can see this at a park. You can see this all over the place. A young kid will fall off the swing and then they'll look at the parent with this like super shocked face. But they're not crying. They're not screaming. They actually don't know what to do. They're like, oh, dang, that kind of hurt a little bit, a little shocked, a little scared. I don't know how I'm supposed to respond. And you see it, if a parent is like, oh my gosh, and they go run over to that, the kid all of a sudden starts crying. I mean, there's a good like 3, 4, 5 seconds where we're all just standing there, the kid's looking confused at the parent and the parent's looking at the kid, and everybody's just waiting to see how we're all going to react. And when the parents like start to freak out and think it's a big deal and go run over there, oh my gosh, are you okay? The kid starts to cry. Well, when that becomes your response, you're developing a behavior. And this is like, and it's not necessarily, that's not obvious to everybody, but it's like for us, our kids would fall, they would give us the shocked look, and then we'd start clapping. We'd be like, oh, yeah, good job. You're good. Get up. Get back on. And then, bam, no crying, no nothing. Just get back up, get back on like nothing ever happened. Those are two different approaches, but they're two different outcomes. They're two different mentalities, right? Because it's like, it's okay. You don't have to scream and freak out. You know, when you get hurt. Our youngest son, when he gets hurt, sometimes he'll run to wherever mom is. So I'll be there. Maybe we're playing basketball in the front yard, or like we're riding our bikes and he falls off his bike. He will run. I mean, like over an acre and then in the house to find his mom where he can give her a hug. Clearly he's fine. I mean, he's like sprinting. But it's funny. She went on a girls trip and we built this big teeter-totter that you ride your mountain bike on. And there's this, and then I don't remember what even happened. But anyways, he got hurt and he went running off to go find mom, but mom's not there. So then he just came back. And then the next time he was like, he took like 4 steps. Like he got hurt, took 4 steps. He's like, oh, there's nobody to go to. And he just stopped. For whatever, I guess I'm not the nurturing type, but he just stopped. He's like, there's nowhere to go to. You know, it's like, it's just interesting. How do you develop different behaviors? How do you overcome behavior? Whatever, you know, it's like but your environment really shapes who you become. Did you have something to say on that? Or?
I'm just They're
just funny examples.
Well, I thought you were going to tell a story about how I fell off the teeter-totter because I came home and then they told me I needed to try it.
She went running for
the first time I did all right, and I just kind of walked it. The second time I flipped over my handlebars.
That was my fault. She got a new bike, and then I didn't know that her seat post was so long that when you put it as low as it would go, it was too high. and so that threw her, all her weight was over the handlebars. So she had no hope. That was my fault. So we probably cut that seat post down.
I'm all right. All my injuries have healed.
She did eat it really hard, though. It would have been a really good fail video.
Yeah. Should have had a video of that.
She's like, this is not the kind of biking I like to do. Bouncing off the ground.
It hurt.
Damn.
I got the wind knocked out of me.
Yeah.
But there was kind of everybody just watched for a second. Then James just walked over and helped me stand up. I was like, I'm just going to walk this off.
Did everyone start clapping?
No, I think everyone was more shocked that I was the one on the ground.
That was more of a shocked moment.
Yeah, definitely the shock. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yikes.
I haven't done it since. I'm sure there'll come a day where somebody...
I think you did.
Did I? I don't know. I think let's
We'll
clear that.
We'll do it again. Spot you this time.
Oh my god.
I was like one of those spotters where they're standing there with their arms out and then the person face plants and they never moved. No,
You're
I
standing
don't
there
know.
with your arms open, like what
Yeah,
happened?
but she fell off on the other side. I'm like, no.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so culture, right? I mean, all these things shape up culture. I mean, right now, right? I mean, I got my kids. I had all my kids. I mean, this is a big teeter-totter. I mean, it's like, I think it's 16 feet long, and it's 2 feet off the ground. And so, you know, it's a teeter-totter, so one end's on the ground, the other one sits 16 feet again, and so it's 2 feet off the ground in the middle. So you're the end that's up in the air is really up in the air. And so you got to ride up this thing with like balance and confidence, because then the front's got to tip down and then you got to roll down without, you know, falling off.
Mm-hmm, yep.
But I had everybody doing it. I mean, Ethan was killing it, you know, and he's 5 years old. So, you know, but it's just like, so it's culture though, right? It's like because again, it's like what that family deems important is then what the kids experience as important. And so it's like, you know, for us, exercise is a real thing. Discipline is a real thing. Work ethic is a real thing. And so it's like, all right, so it's like our kids, you know, they're homeschooled. And so, you know, it's like, all right, you guys got to wake up at 7:30. You got to eat breakfast, get dressed. Somebody's got to do the dishes. And then you got to come downstairs and do your sandbag workout, right? And it's like, you know, and now they take over writing what their workout is on the board. But it's like, all right, it's like, hey, look, if we value these things and you need discipline in your life and you need these non-negotiables, right? Where we're taking care of like the core of who we are, right? We're reading the Bible, we're reading books, we're exercising, we're connecting. And then we're doing things that, you know, cultivate our gift. It's like, all right, well, if those are the things that are important to us, right? I mean, that's got to be reflected in our lives. And I just think it's cool how we're all thinking about culture and we're all thinking about the trajectory of our lives, you know, living on purpose and having vision. We understand that there's steps you got to take to actually make that happen. And there's a mentality you have to actually be able to achieve it. But it's just interesting thinking about all these things, you know, because I think we were trying to, just as we were kind of going through this progression of culture, it just kind of, you know, we're talking about our marriage and our kids and whatever. And so at some point, Be Transformed came into view. And I think at that point I had like a basic working knowledge of like how the mind worked. And that was just through my own crazy mind seasons where I went crazy. And so I think BT already existed. And, you know, and it's these things then it's like, all right, this is what we want our culture to be about. This is the stuff that me and Carolyn would talk about. This is the stuff we would check our mentalities based upon. It's like, hey, like, you know, whatever, here's what's going on. Here's how we change that. But then, you know, when I was 32, I got into these 5 books. I got into this whole new realm to me of reading and, you know, prior to that, I probably read maybe 5 books in my entire life, and they were probably all through school, and which meant I probably didn't actually read them. I read the Bible, but I didn't read any books because I was under the impression that all the books sucked, that they were all religious and stupid, and I'm mostly right. But no, like I was so ignorant. I just like I was a learner. You know, I had a business, I had a handyman business, and I was always on YouTube. Like, and there's these, you know, trades professionals that were like, you know, it's, you know, I'm just watching like essentially just like training programs. It's not, yeah, but I mean, they're a little more organic, but it was like I loved to learn, but reading wasn't one of my mediums to do that. But like all of a sudden, and prior to this, I had such a great desire to hear something worthwhile. I was like, somebody say something of value. Somebody say something that you could actually use, that could actually have an impact on your life. This was going on for quite some time, and because prior to that, right? I mean, I just read the Bible. I read the Bible. We were probably going to church at that time, and I definitely prided myself in the fact that it's like everything I knew because of my relationship with God and because like my cultivation, like in the Bible, and I had a great pride in that. But then I also had this great desire. I don't know if I could have said it like that, but it's like essentially I wanted more, but I didn't know how to get it, and I couldn't get it from a Sunday service. I was like, there was a longing, but I didn't know where to access it. And so it was very fascinating because it was like the season when I was 32 years old, like God just started to direct my YouTube watching, and like somehow I stumbled onto Bob Proctor, and it was fascinating because he was talking about the mind, and he was saying everything that I was saying, but then he went deeper into why that actually happens, and I was like, what? Like, you know, who knew? And then come to find out, he had like written a book, and it was called The Art of Living, and so I read that book. And this is a whole new world for me, reading books, but this would have been like winter time where our business would be slowed down, and so I read this book, and there was like 2 main things that came out of it. I think one is like understanding the subconscious mind a little bit more, and just the mind in general. But then he had talked about in the book how he would do these seminars, and it was just reading about him doing these seminars that sparked potential inside of me, and I was like, I could do that. There was something in me that was just waiting, like that needed a little bit of I don't know, help. It needed some fertilization, right? And it was like that book sparked that thing, and which is crazy. And then we found Miles Monroe on YouTube, and this was hilarious. This is not something I don't think we've ever shared before, but there was there was this video, and it was just a short clip out of like another message, but it was entitled "Why Men Need Sex," and I was like, "Oh, Carolyn, we got to watch this." No, but it was like this whole thing about like how men hold the seed, and it's like that seed's full of potential and wants to be cultivated or whatever. I don't even really remember, but
it was meant to be. I mean, it was obviously a funny video, but but also held a lot of truth in it, and
yeah. But like stuff you'd never heard before. And
it was relational. It wasn't just like, you know.
She's scared right now.
No, I'm not scared.
We were married.
I'm not
I want to do married things.
I'm not scared. No, he like turned it over and he's like, we got to watch this. Like, we definitely watched it together. And it was funny because it was
funny.
But no, I'm not scared.
No, but then, so it's like, so I would find these people on YouTube who were saying things that were like, dang. And then found out that then they wrote books, and so I bought these books. I mean, I think Bill Johnson was in there, maybe Chris Valentin was in there, but it's like Miles. I don't know if it was the first Miles book I read, but it might have been. It was Rediscovering the Kingdom, and this book, I'm like blown my mind. I'm reading this book, And I'm just like, I grew up going to church. I was in these massive, I don't know if they're massive. I was in these big evangelistic campaigns in other countries. We're standing on stage, in stadiums, you know, doing stuff and you know, whatever. I was in, I'm doing air quotes. I was in missions. And I'm like, I've never heard this stuff before. And it's like having such an impact. And there's one time we were just in the kitchen, I'm crying and I'm talking to Karen. I'm just pissed. I'm like, how is it possible that I've been to all these places, grew up in church, and nobody's ever told me what this guy is telling me right now? It entered in a whole new era, because I feel like before those 5 books, because I read those 5 books in 3 months, right? So this is like never before. This is a new territory right here. And outside, like after I read those 5 books, I came up with this like 4-session seminar, and which again was inspired by, you know, it's just funny how I was longing for more information, and I just had no idea how to get a hold of it. And then when I did, but I got a hold of the right information, dude, it freaking just, it was on. And enter in, like, you know, there's a transition. And I was always on my own path, and Carolyn will testify to that.
That was in our vows. He took me off my paved path and took me on the bumpy one on the side.
Haven't stopped
in a good way.
In a good way. Haven't regretted it ever since. No. But, no, but yeah, I mean, you know, it's just like enter in growth, which is super uncomfortable, but super powerful, super everything. And, but it's like these then became really the ideas that then, like, we had a BT group. You know, we were at that time, we were reading just through the Bible on Sundays. And, but then, like, you know, I read these books and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm sharing it with our small group with how I do with all kinds of passion and whatever. It's just like 4 or 5 of us in a room. And, but it's just like these ideas. I was just like, you know, Miles would talk about a verse that I grew up hearing, and it's just like he explained it in a way that I'd never heard before, and it actually made sense. Like you could actually apply it. And, you know, it's like, you know, people talk about, oh, you know, man makes the plans, but God directs the steps. And, you know, it's like, well, don't make plans because they're all going to be wrong because you're an idiot. And God, you can never know what God wants you to do. And Miles is like, he's like, look, God doesn't have anything to direct if you don't have any plans. He's like, you know, you could go onto a cruise ship. He's like, and he was like saying, he's like, this one time he went onto this cruise ship and people were giving him a tour, and they took him down to like where the captain, you know, whatever, where you drive the boat.
I think it's up.
He went over and around and inside the cruise ship, and where they had the controls for the ship, and the guy was like moving around. He's like, you know, you move this one and it makes you go left, you move this, it goes right, whatever. And he was like, the guy was moving the thing, but it wasn't going anywhere. And he was like, you actually have to be moving to be able to steer something. And it was just like this whole thing is like, you don't have plans, God doesn't have anything to direct. If you don't start moving, even if you're moving in the wrong direction, you won't actually ever be moving if you don't actually start going. Anyways, but it was like, that approach was like, had action and like freedom, where everything else was like stupid, weak, like don't do anything, don't try, blah, blah. And it's just like, this guy's blowing my mind. And all these guys, right, were just blowing my mind. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I was just going through this whole, like, finally, there's somebody did have something worth saying. And it was shaping my life, and therefore kind of just shaping everything we were doing. Because, you know, again, culture, right, it starts with the beliefs. And so getting into all this new knowledge and these new ways of looking at things was then shaping like our core beliefs, which then shapes our trajectory. So, I mean, like you enter in, really like who we are and what we are. And so, like we're meeting in these groups and we're reading these books and we're talking about these ideas and we're talking about purpose, and then Logan comes and works with us, on our pressure washing business. And then you start your own thing. And it's like, we're doing all these things on purpose. Like we're seeking direction, and we're like, oh, hey, what if we did this? And where would this take us? But all these things were based off of the ideas that we were learning and then applying. And I think that's not to sound too crazy, but it's like that's one of the special things about Be Transformed is like the content that we get into is first and foremost for us. We're not this isn't just about like, hey, let me just share a nice idea because you got to have a podcast and you got to share ideas, or it's just some repetition. It's like, this is the stuff that we're like intentionally cultivating for ourselves. The message, we're first and foremost talking to ourselves here. And it's like, because we seek to become who we're created to be. To be able to achieve the vision that God has given us and the pathway that we're on, we have to become more than we are right now. We have to understand more. We have, all these things. And so, first and foremost, we're trying to cultivate this to get this into us. But what happens then is that approach then is like, that's how you actually become transformed, is these ideas become a part of who you are. And then they become expressed through you naturally because they became you. There's stuff I learned from Miles that I forgot that I learned. Like it became such a part of me that it's mine. And it's like, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of truth, is it's just supposed to become you. That's just your natural then expression. You become so conformed and transformed by it that it's just like breathing.
I think the thing I was thinking about is, you talk about you didn't read anything because you thought the content wasn't good. Where I was reading things, but I wasn't evaluating it in the sense that, it's like take the good, not the whatever. I think about the contrast, and at some point. Because in school, you're taught just to read it. Like, this is fact. This is, you read and learn and memorize and then spit it back. And then at some point, you have to learn to read, evaluate it, check it against your own beliefs, check it against, your own thoughts. And it's just very interesting, just that process of learning. And when you talk about taking me off my paved path, I feel like that was part of it. It was just like taking me off the path of like, just, this is what it looks like. This is how you do it. You wake up, you have your quiet time. Like it just, you read these books, I just think it turned into something that was mine instead of just like the habits, the practices, and that's just something that was created over time, where you just create a habit, but then you don't know why you're doing it and it lacks the meaning. And so I think the development of getting into books that really actually shaped you and then allowed you to apply them versus just like, oh, that's a nice idea. Okay. And then move on. And so that's the main thing I was thinking of is just really learning to read to grow instead of just like reading because you should be.
Yeah, I think I can relate to what both of you guys said. Just thinking back to like the material that like prior to BT, it was like I need to listen to these messages and these, whatever, this media or whatever, because I'm so wrong, and if listening to all these things will help make me right. But it was like, even though I was pursuing Christ, it was still dead. Like I still felt dead. So it was like all that material just created that constant. It wasn't bringing life, like you said. And then post, obviously post BT, I think the first book that I read was The Purpose and Power of Vision. Then it was like, okay, now this stuff is starting to bring life. but yeah, I don't know. You just do stuff just because you feel like you need to, I think sometimes, or at least for me. And I felt like I needed to do that because of all the X, Y's, and Z's that are wrong with my life. And so that was my response to and that was the culture that then I created in myself, was like, just like this. Well, if I'm not constantly listening to this media or reading these books or whatever, then I must not be a true Christian. And so it was just, there was still like death and all of that. That was the culture of just being mundane, not having anything going on. And like Carolyn said, like that was the paved road, and it was like the worst road.
Totally. Well, but see, that was the whole thing, right? It's like that. So that was culture, though. So that had certain activities that you learned in that culture, but it was missing, the reason behind it, and it was missing the correct perspective. And so it's like, so it didn't produce anything of value. It didn't, but because there was no other pathway, it was like, this is all I know. And you get concluded that, yep, I'm wrong. I'm jacked up. I'm terrible. And so I'm just going to continue to pursue God and listen to these things and this music and all that stuff is just reinforcing this state of mind. But you don't know any of that, right? I mean, you're just really trying to you're trying to be connected, and you're trying to take the information you have and you're trying to use it. But I think that the challenge is that when the information is wrong and you don't know it,
the results are wrong.
Right.
Well, your results suck, but you don't have anything to base it off of. There's nothing else to be like, well, what about this? It's like, because if your core beliefs, well, I guess we were talking about this before we started, but when I think about like, okay, we are different. I've always been different. Well, we're different than we're different than other people. We're different than other organizations, and we think different thoughts and we take different actions. So it's like, all right, well, how do you actually know? How do we know that we're right? And it's not like, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, but it's like, how do we know that we're not wrong? How do we know that because we're on a different path? How do we know that we're not like crazy? Like, do we just, or how do we know we're not a cult, right? Because I mean, you just get sold on ideas, and all kinds of people get sold on all kinds of different ideas. I mean, people kill people because they're sold on an idea. So, because those ideas then shape your action. So it's like, how can we judge our own selves to ensure that we're not just straight up crazy? But it's the results.
Yeah.
It's not just the talk, it's the results. What does your life actually look like, right? People talk about transformation and change, and I'm like, look, that actually has a pathway, and then your life actually has to look different. If you got the same problems today that you had last year and the year before that and the year before that, you're not growing. So how do we know that we're not like crazy? It's like, you can look at our lives and you can see function. You can see things getting better, right? You can look at how we're cultivating our family dynamics, right? The conversations that we have, as real and raw as they are, like, but you can look at that and you can, like, there's a beautiful pathway being created. And it's like, the people were, it's just funny. I was talking to somebody and on a Sunday, and he was asking, he was like, hey, did you go to, I was like, oh, did you go to church? And I was like, oh, this is church. We were talking on the phone, and he's like, no, but you go to church. I said, I am the church. And he's like, yeah, but you go to a Sunday service and you sing songs and you preach the message and whatever. And with him, we're getting into a few things, and we actually did like a small BT loan, small business loan, for him to start this business. And then now we're all talking about trying to get look at three other people's business plans to see if we can do small business loans with them. And I'm like, which relationship is having a bigger impact in your life? Is it going to church, or is it this was it what we're doing and working on right now? And he's like, what we're working on right now. I'm like, it's the whole, right. Like you go being like, okay, church is like the thing you do and it's important. And totally. I think church can be awesome. There are people, man, who, and their messages that we listen to, that they are doing epic things and and we are feeding off of the content that they're the real life truth. We're feeding off that stuff. But it's like, I think this message, which is the message of the kingdom, you have to already be hearing the call. There already has to be like because we've shared these things with other people, and people who have not heard the call get very offended. They really do. Because essentially what you're saying is you're saying that the things that they hold most sacred aren't actually sacred, and it's actually kind of misunderstood. That's very offensive, because your core beliefs shape everything you do. So if you try to fight with somebody about their core beliefs, it's just not going to go very well. But it's like the people. This is because for me, it's like even when I got into this stuff, it was like over a year and a half or millions of years where I was like, I'm just longing to hear something good. The call was coming out, and it's like the call is like it's like there's something more than just this. There's something more than just the routine of going to church and hearing these songs and these messages and then just going about your business and then doing it again. There's something more to being like, hey man, it's like, hey, you got to pursue God, but you got to get right with God. And then, you got to get on your knees and you got to seek God and you got to wait on him. And you're like, what, and you're doing this loop. And again, your whole mentality is like, I just want to be connected to God and do what's right. And you're trying to take these messages and apply them, and you're trying to listen to these songs. But the problem is that when they're all reinforced with like these incorrect perspectives, it shapes the outcome of your life. And there was this one time I was in a worship service, and we were standing up, and people were singing the song. And this is what God is telling me. I'm in the middle of a worship service. People are singing these songs, and the message, the picture that I got, it was this circle, and he's like, it's a maze, and it's a circle, but you can't tell that you're in it when you're in it. And it's like there's these main core messages. It's like it was like these four messages. And they cause you to keep moving forward, but what you don't realize is that you're going in a circle. So you're stuck in this loop. So you're not moving in a forward direction. You're looping it. But you're putting your effort, your energy, right? I mean, you want to follow God, but I'm not good enough. Well, but you got to do some things that are worthwhile. You got to get out there and influence the world for Jesus. And then it's like, oh no, but you suck. You're a sinner. You're weak. You're broken. Oh, we're in need. Yes, but no, you need to go push. But oh no, you got to wait. You need to wait. You need to wait on the Lord. And it's like you're trying to move somewhere. But just when you're starting to move, the message brings you back to not moving. And I'm in the middle of a worship service, and this is the download that I'm getting. So call me crazy, but it's like there's a call that goes out that says, "Hey, man, there's something more than this." And it's like but then I think the people who hear that call, you've got this desire, you're starting to see the pathway forward, but you can't reconcile it with your old mentality. You can't reconcile it with the old message, with the old songs. You can't reconcile it because all those things say like, hey, the thing you're actually trying to pursue is wrong. Should I go out and actually work in the field? That's the old mentality, right? And it's like, no, but you've got the ideas that make sense, but you've got this old mentality that's kind of it's got an anchor to keep you to stop, not progress. And so when I think about the BT message and who we are, it's like there's really a call that goes out, and if you don't have that call, this stuff doesn't make sense.
It just collides with the culture and the things, your beliefs, and you can't hear it because it's too contrary. So it has to already be building inside of you to be able to like reconcile it.
Right. Because it is contrary.
And for a long time I struggled with that because I was like, how could it be contrary? Like we're on the same path, but it's core belief. Yes. Like, okay, we believe in God. We believe that, he died for our sins, but it's just like, there was just so much more and it didn't stop there. And so I think, cause we've had different seasons in our life where we moved on from something, and I was like, why is it that, we couldn't continue on together? And it was that colliding of what you valued most. They weren't the same. And it wasn't that they were wrong and we were right. It was different.
I don't know if everybody can be right, but totally.
Well, it is just like the work, anyways.
No. Well, because this whole thing is just, it's like, it's a process of like the decisions we've made, the situations we've been in. What is it? Jocko Willink says it like this, because we're talking about culture, we're talking about organizations, we're talking about us, our culture. And what's interesting is knowing who you are and knowing why you are. Like, what are those core beliefs? I think it's super powerful, because then it really gives you insight into who you are. Most people have no idea who they are, and it's evident. But having that identity, this is where it makes you dangerous. So this idea, Carolyn always makes a funny face when I talk about being dangerous. Okay, but it was Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone was talking about, he's got these guys, he's like, you want to be dangerous. He's like, these guys could walk into a business, get past the gatekeeper, get to the decision maker, and sell them like this product. He's like, those people were dangerous because they could actually execute a mission and get it done. They could get through the barriers, right? They could make stuff happen. And I was like, that's what dangerous is. Like, you can have vision, have ideas, and you can implement them, because it's like, you're not sitting around waiting for somebody else's permission. It's like, who you are, what you're called to do, and you go and you work it with like expert skill. That's being dangerous. And when I think about like understanding these core beliefs and values makes us dangerous, because it really establishes who we are. We can define it. We can like marinate on it, right? We can cultivate it. It just gives us greater understanding into why we do what we do. And that just makes you dangerous. Because, Jocko Willink is funny. I've just heard him say, is like, he prides himself on being able to work with anybody. And I'm like, ugh, I couldn't say that. I can't say that. But it's like, but this is why, right? Because you talk about, it's like, okay, well, we should all be able to work together because we all, love Jesus and we all want to help people. The problem is that actually isn't a definition. That's not actually the specifics and the nitty gritties of what makes you, and we're about to get into it. But it's like, when your core beliefs begin with Jesus died for your sins, you're going to end up with some problems, because you're in the middle of the story. And when you're in the middle of the story, you've missed all the context that led up to this whole point. And so when your core beliefs begin with Jesus died for my sins, then the next thing that follows is brokenness, weakness, and I'm in constant need, and I can't ever catch up. So I'm always trying to pursue forward and failing and falling, and I'm just trying to make it to heaven. But that's because you're missing this whole reality of sonship. You're missing the reality of why. And that's where our core beliefs come in, is there. Jesus came to restore something. So it's that restoration that you got to get sold on, because people get so sold because on this whole idea of death, like you were talking about, Logan, you get so sold on this idea of death that you actually never learn how to live. and no offense, but it's like most of the songs and most of the messages in certain areas are just this revolving door around this whole idea of death and brokenness and weakness. Well, then there's no foundation to ever start to build a life. People talk about, it's like, well, I'm a new creation, and they'll sing songs about it and they'll try to convince themselves about it, but then they'll never just accept that reality and then begin to build a life on it. And that's a huge problem. So for me, I can't stand the stuff that would reinforce that. And people say, well, we all love Jesus and we want to help people. And here they are with this message of brokenness. And I'm like, that doesn't help anybody, because you're going to end up in that, you're stuck in that maze, that circle maze, and you're never actually going to be able to live on purpose. So like, for me, that's fundamentally backwards. It disintegrates and wars against the ideas of truth. So you can't say that just because we believe in Jesus that we can work together, because those ideas affect your trajectory, and we are all about trajectory. We're all about actually taking ideas and turning them into realities, but we know the power of an idea and how that shapes your mentality. And so, but just being able to define that, I couldn't define that before, and we've definitely had some situations, and just trying to figure out why are we all different, and why can't people I don't know, why is it not working, and why am I saying it's never going to work? Well, this is why, because it comes back to the core beliefs. Let me say it like this, and this is just a general statement. Being born again, right? So okay, we all love Jesus, right? So you're talking about being born again. That's beautiful. Good job. That is not synonymous with a renewed mind. Being transformed by the renewing of your mind is not automatic, and therefore it's not guaranteed. So you got to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, meaning we got to get back into the original intent of who God is, who we are, and what this life is about, and then how to get into it. If those main ideas are not the same, it will never work. If you're working with people, again, who don't want to grow and don't want to learn. I can work with people who want to learn, who want to grow. Like, I can't work with people who don't. It's just one of our fundamental like values. And so, yeah, it's super fascinating, this whole topic. And this is, I think, what makes us dangerous. And this is what kind of makes us a little more independent, is because I feel like this really establishes our culture, understanding what it is and where it comes from.
I was just kind of thinking, like, what's the proof? Like, over the last couple of years, one of your like resolutions was like the year of prove it, and so it's like the proof is what is like the fruit that is born is what is that's the proof of like that you're going in the right direction. So it's like when I was getting into all this material and trying to read all these books and go to all these services and all that, but there was no fruit that I could prove anything with. And so then it's like, well, what causes someone to like accept a new culture, like a new belief system? And I was thinking of like that verse or that story in the Bible where it's like, I don't know what the context of it is, but it's like this individual like cleans out their heart. Like their heart is like pictured as like a house, and they clean the house out and sweep it really good. And then it's like the master comes back and finds the house full of just other stuff, like worldly stuff or whatever. Like, I don't know do you know what verse I'm talking about?
There's one where it's about like demon possession, where it's like
maybe
a demon gets cast out, and then it's like you sweep up the house, and but then that because it doesn't get filled up with something, then that demon goes and gets 7 others, and the person is worse off the second round.
Yeah, so maybe not the same.
Yeah, it's going in the right direction to get the idea.
You can like sweep the house clean and fill it with whatever you think is right, but then like when the master comes back and knocks on the door to restore or guide or like take you on a new path or whatever, it's like if the house is already full, then you don't ever answer the door, even if the house is full of good things. Like it may not be the right thing. So yeah, that's just what I was kind of thinking about. It's like who accepts that how do you accept a new culture? It's like you have to be kind of like, you have to have the consciousness that you're missing something. And it's like if you take a look at your life and there's no fruit being born, there's no productivity, there's nothing like being born out of the actions that you're taking or the habits that you have, then it's like, yeah, that there might be a necessity to reconsider what direction you're going or what culture you're involved in or all that, even if you think it's good.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's a real thing to be busy doing things, and they could be good things, but they're not the right things. And so even though you could be busy but not feel satisfied, you could have good things going on but still be missing something. And I think that's that's that core thing of purpose, where it's like if you don't know why you're doing the things you're doing, you're just doing good things, then it really can lead you in the wrong direction, even though it might have right components or good components.
Yeah. Or even just no direction, or you're just kind of stagnant.
Yeah, absolutely. Without aim. Yeah, I think there was a story. It was like Bruce Lee. Somebody came to Bruce Lee and he's like, hey, I want you to teach me. And this guy was already was into martial arts or whatever. And as the story went, it's like Bruce Lee had a cup and it was full. And he's like, look, this is you. Like, there's no room for me to teach you anything because it's already full. He's like, you would have to pour out some of what's in there to be able to make room for what I would teach you. And that's the thing, right? It's like, that's where it's like that call. And like you guys are talking about, if that call is so important because it prepares you, and it brings this level of dissatisfaction where you're like, something is fundamentally incorrect here and I can't put my finger on it. I don't even know if I'm right. But there's you're just that teeter-totter and that tension of like, man, there's something else. I just cannot for the life of me define it, and I don't know what to do or where to go. But it's like unless you're willing to let go of some of the things that you learned to be true, to be able to relearn the actual truth, it's like there's nothing we can do for you. There's nothing anybody can do for you. Yeah. Because until you can start to see that there is something more, you're so sold on what you have that you wouldn't be willing to let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And that's why it's offensive.
That's why it's offensive, right? Because what I'm holding is so valuable. How could you dare tell me it's wrong? But it's like, but awareness, not everybody can see what you can see. And so it's like you're looking at like, hey, you can see the results are different, and the mentality and the anguish of heart, which people think is holy. And you're like, there's nothing I'm going to say. I'm not going to say anything because there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to help you, because you got to hear the call first.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's like, in Matthew 28, Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. Well, it's like, okay, a disciple is a learner. It's a student, right? And how do you teach somebody to be a student and like with like these ideas that are from truth, right? So how do you actually get somebody on the correct path? Well, it's like, all right, well, you actually help somebody solve a real life problem that they have that they couldn't solve. It's like, if you want to teach somebody to be a student, teach them something you can actually use, solves a problem, and then they'll be like, hey, what else you got? It's the results, right? It's the actual change and transformation. Too many people are like, well, hey, you just got to get saved. Well, and then what? You go to all these services and, well, we're all broken, we're all weak, and we're all terrible. What did you just get saved into? Because right? That's what kind of life is that? With you promised me something wonderful, and all I got was the dungeon. But but it's hard. It's just it can be hard to see that though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that just kind of gets down into, then it's like, all right, well, what are our core beliefs? Like, what is the stuff that makes us us? All right. So next time on the BT podcast, we're going to get into part 2 of what our actual core beliefs are and what our values and standards are. And we're just going to take a look at like what these things that have actually made us, these ideas that actually have shaped our actions and the trajectory of our lives, right? They're shaping our beliefs. They're shaping our actions. They're shaping how we, what we do and teach our kids. And so next week next time we're going to take a look at what that actually is. So guys, I hope this stuff is making sense. I hope this stuff is as wonderful for you as it is for me. I hope we're communicating it as we're seeing it. But yeah, this is I think this is, I don't know, this is big. This feels big. It really does in terms of like the trajectory of Be Transformed. So for me, this is very exciting. So my good peoples, thanks for kicking it with us. Until next time.